this session. Now we're going to have infrastructure for sustainable agricultural production, ways for food security and in Brazil and Africa. To moderate this panel, I'd like to call to the stage Luis Farah Monteiro from Record TV channel. Luis, you're very welcome. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in this forum, Brazil-Africa Forum. Thank you, Professor João, for having me here. He knows I really like the African culture because I lived for 3 years in South Africa as a reporter for Jornal da Record, Record News. And without further ado, I'd like to call the panelists to join me at the stage to talk about infrastructure for sustainable agricultural production, ways for food security in Brazil and in Africa. I'd like to start by calling my friend Monica Monteiro, VP, Commercial VP of New Businesses in Times Brazil CNBC. So Monica, please. Mr. Aristide Belemorro, CDB, CEO of Mali Airlines SA, and former special advisor of the President of the Republic from Mali. Now Mr. Carlos Alberto de Souza Filho, member of the Technical Board of Brazil Fleet. Miguel Azevedo, Director of Investment Bank for Middle East and Africa and Portugal from Citi. So please, Dr. You please be seated. I'd like to remind you about the importance of this topic because according to studies published by World Bank, around 37% of food produced in Africa are wasted or lost due to poor storage. Food supply are 4 times longer than in Europe, for example, and they can represent up to 45% of the price of some basic products. This session will talk about the strategic role of logistics infrastructure such as transport, storage, irrigation, and access to technology to amplify agricultural production, reducing costs and ensuring the quality of food, especially in terms of investments in this sector that can overcome bottlenecks and encourage agribusiness and promote rural development, in addition to strengthening food security for both in Brazil and Africa, in addition to exploring cooperation models and innovation that potentialize those advancements. So I'd like to start with initial words from our panelists. I want you please to introduce yourself and talk about the cooperation between Brazil and Africa. How do you see this in a moment when Brazil is part of BRICS? In terms of BRICS, how this collaboration can be intensified, consider that you have in the same group in addition to South Africa, Brazil, and countries such as Ethiopia and Egypt. Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Bosco, for having me here. He's always bringing Africa closer to Brazil. This is really the right place where you do business in Brazil-Africa Institute, where we have the best partnerships. So thank you, Daniel Balaban here at the audience. I'm so proud of him, General Director of World Food Program. So he knows in practical terms what we do in Africa, not only in Africa, but in all countries that you see World Food Program logo. I'm so proud of it because I always learn from Daniel on how we can work better, bring Brazil and Africa closer, Well, good afternoon to you all. I am the president of BRICS through WBA Women Business. So we promote women in businesses. So we have many leaders of heavy duty industries, and women are in those industries, but very few of them. I'm not complaining here, okay? But actually, when we hear, okay, let's bring women, but there is much more than women washing rather than real action. So last year, the Commerce World Organization said that we have grown only 1% of Brazilian women, companies that has women in leadership, despite all the efforts we are doing. So something is going wrong. We're doing something that is not making us move forward because we hear about women in all speeches, we hear about women in all programs, but figures are still the same. So something's going wrong. So I am here to talk about infrastructure. And today I am the VP in TV channel for business journalism that will celebrate its anniversary next week. We are promoting increasingly more businesses. That's why I'm here. And I'd like to thank Loise, and my name is Monica Montero. Thank you, Monica. Now pass the floor to Mr. Aristide, CEO from Mali Airlines SA. I'd like you to talk about the infrastructure for agricultural production and the integration between Brazil and Africa. And as a airlines executive, what can we do to enhance this integration, overcoming challenges both in Brazil and in Africa?
Thank you. First of all, let me thank Professor Bosco for the opportunity. This is not my first time in Brazil. This is my second time. The first time around, I came from America, where I lived for 23 years. And I just relocated to Mali 10 months ago, served as a special advisor to the president of Mali. And in the next, about a few months ago, I was called upon to lead the effort of creating our national airline. And I'm here for that reason, and I met with the great company Embraer yesterday. I spent the day with them. And to answer your question, we have to be intentional. And thank Professor Bosco, who's been for many, many years. You have to be intentional because Brazil and Africa, and as His Excellency said earlier, there is a cultural bond that exists between Brazil and Africa. But for some reason, the businesses are not taking advantage of that. And when it comes to trading, there are two elements that are very important. You need to be able to move the money, and you need to be able to move the goods. To get here to Brazil, I left Mali Saturday morning, 11, and I got here Sunday evening, okay? Flew east, you already know where I went to, and come back all the way to Brazil. Currently, those are the options. You either go east or northeast or north to go to Brazil. There is a better way. We have to be intentional. How about Fortaleza, which is 6 hours from the western coast of Africa? So we have to be intentional. And that's why I'm here, and I hope that we can contribute. Mali Airlines is a new established national airline, but when it comes to perishable goods, for example, we don't have to go through different hubs in the south or the east. We can go from Fortaleza to West Africa. So that's my first answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Dr. Carlos Alberto de Souza, ele como
Dr. Carlos Alberto, as the Maritime pilot, will talk about this topic. Again, talking about the activity is leading vessels in restricted areas. How can this be improved in Brazil in terms of commerce, industry, exchanging goods? How can we bring more advancements to our country in this sector? I'd like you to talk about your area that is ship piloting, talking about this activity that is not very well known. So I'd like to say, what is this ship pilot, so to say, or harbor pilot, maritime pilot? In Portuguese, we use this word prático, which doesn't convey much technical knowledge. Someone that has learned just by doing that. So the activity of um, pilotage is advisory to lead vessels in restricted waters. In other words, in places due to local peculiarities, the free movement of vessels is made harder. So we take the vessel free from obstacles and dangers. So the pilot is a professional that is specialized in leading the vessels with security close to obstacles and dangers. So I'd like to say that vessel piloting is not something that we have only in Brazil. No, it is not. So we use this expression when we have something that is only in Brazil. Oh, this is a jabuticaba. That's a fruit that we have in Brazil, only in Brazil. So all over the world, regardless the level of technology the countries have, every country demand shipping companies to have the services of those maritime pilots. So as the vessel are getting close to the port, they go to the vessel through and they take over the ship, leading or piloting the vessel, the ship, within those dangerous waters. So they know where the deep uh, they know where stones are, winds, and tides. They know how to control the vessel. There's a term such as the conductor of a vessel because he or she knows how to turn the vessel. There's an entry and an entry way and an outside way, so they have to turn the vessel. And what is a port?
So basically, the ship has to be there, and that will allow the loading and unloading of that vessel or that ship. So usually they take advantage of the geography or the waterways there. And there are many different dangers. Curves, for example, in the port where I work, in the port of Santos, 64 beds or docking beds are there. So they have different types of maneuvers that need to be used to dock those vessels. So we need to contribute to safeguarding life at sea, preventing against pollution of the water, and maintaining communication lines free and unhindered. So I think you all remember the accident in the Suez Channel where that ship was stuck there and all the loss and damage that caused for world economy. So I used my time here to talk about what I do in my profession as a harbor pilot. So how can we contribute to commerce with Africa, to trade with Africa, to food security? So I can talk a little bit more about that. But I've done a DNA test, and I'm the 3.3% African, even though I don't look like, but I'm 78% Portuguese. But in my DNA test, I'm from I have some Senegalese ancestry, so I have a special concern and care for Africa. So I was very happy to be invited to talk to my brothers. We are all brothers. We have a common cultural heritage, and I am part African here. Okay, so you're in the right place. So, Mr. Miguel Azevedo, you are the head of investment banking for Middle East and Africa at Citigroup. My question for you, sir, is how can global capital, how can we contribute to the safety? So, I can describe a bit of what I do. Actually, my work is to connect two different worlds. One are the global investors who are, like I say, they are long in their capital and they are short in opportunities to invest. So, to connect these two worlds to the Middle East and to Africa, but I'll focus on Africa here, where in general, the continent is long on opportunities, many opportunities for developing businesses, investing in businesses, but they are short on capital. So, if you can connect those two worlds, you will have the best of both worlds. You can do this in many different ways, which aren't relevant for our conversation today, but we are always trying to bring capital to the African continent. And the type of capital that is essentially commercial capital. So it's capital focused on profits. So, I think I can also talk about how this makes for sustainable development of the continent. But that's my introduction. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Monica, I remember that in the past you invited me to develop a journalistic project in Africa. You have great knowledge of countries like South Africa, Mozambique. So I would like to know what type of cooperation models between Brazil and African countries could be used to accelerate the development of agricultural infrastructure. Maybe some examples of this that you have seen, especially thinking about the participation of women, as you mentioned in your initial talk. What are some examples you have seen? Well, Luis, I'm going to talk about South Africa and Mozambique. They are facing a huge crisis. The young people are facing unemployment, a lot of problems with their economy. So in South Africa, Mozambique, in that whole region, and then we see what happened to Tanzania just this week. And some other countries, and Nigeria also is facing some political problems, and that generates economic instability also. In Brazil, we've also had issues which has this feeling of instability for economic investment. But when you see the amount of young people in Mozambique who want to work, who want to innovate, to be entrepreneurs, and so I'm going to talk about agriculture specifically. I think we have huge opportunities to bring our two continents together and to work on agriculture. Focusing on women, most of the cooperatives, agriculture cooperatives in Africa are run by women. And so food in the African continent is coming from the labor of the women in Africa. So, in great part. So, I was also talking to Mr. Balamin, and he was saying that in many cooperatives here in Brazil, especially small and medium-sized cooperatives in Brazil, we have a lot of women working in them. And how can we make these cooperatives work with a leadership that is going to produce enough food to be able to export? You won't be able to fill a container or a ship or an airplane, and it will be too expensive. So the work that we are doing actually is to use academia to train this leadership to work with these cooperatives so that they can have the production that will be exported in the future. So we are working with Mozambique. Here in Brazil, my work is specifically with the Women's Business Alliance is focused on women, women in industry also, to bring the women leaders together, because what is missing is to have these leaders to bring people together. It's not easy to bring 30, 40 different farmers and their families together in a cooperative. There was an exchange program where we would send tractors to Mozambique, but then we would have to say, okay, this tractor will be used by 20 families here in this area. But then it was very confusing because people had different thoughts, they had different, priorities. So you have to have people who are trained. So it's not enough to, okay, let's ship a tractor to Mozambique. No, they need to learn how to use it. They have to be organized. So you have to have leadership that is trained. And many times, since women in Africa are usually natural leaders in their communities, so that's one way that we can work. I work with the industry leadership here in Brazil to try and train people to work with women in Africa. In the Women's Business Alliance, we have a platform to do that. So we already have women in the energy generation. One of the major ports in China is led by a woman. So we do have women who are leaders in other countries who are going to encourage and who are trained to equip other women. So we are working with and creating this educational program. And in the BRICS, we are also trying to bring and lift up women into these leadership positions. Okay, Dr. Aristide, what are the main challenges as a airline CEO see in the African continent related to agricultural and food security? What's most urgent? What are the priorities so that the transportation of food products does not suffer? And around 37% of the food that is produced in the continent is wasted. So let's say out of every 10 fruits that are harvested, 3 of them are wasted. Okay.
I will add that transportation or logistic add to the final price another 45%. So if we reflect a little bit in what His Excellency said earlier about Brazil leaving the hunger map. So the question that I've been asking myself since attending this conference today is how that model can be replicated in Africa. To your question, there are challenges. First of all, let's identify what are the challenges. In Brazil, you are dealing with a bottleneck. Basically, you have surplus, and you export to the rest of the world. Yes, you still have infrastructure deficiency, but it's not like in Africa. In Africa, we don't. We import food. If we look at the sector that I'm in, only 2% of the world traffic are in Africa, only 2%. Yet, the potential is there. I just mentioned how perishable can leave Brazil through Fortaleza. But right now, that's not the corridor that we're looking at. Today, to move good, you need to build infrastructure. Take the Lobito corridor that link Angola toward the DRC. Who's paying for it? The person who paid for will be using it for his good. Brazil is not part of that. That's the question. So what Africa needs today is not a handout. Africa does not need a handout. Africa needs true partners. And today, Brazil can be that true partner. But the question is Brazil ready for that? That's the question. Professor Bosco had this conference for many years. I've been following it. Last year, the topic for last year, and it was said here that from 2023 to 2024, the trade volume between Brazil and Africa went down from 23 billion to 21 billions, while India and China are respectively 100 billion and 243 billion. That's big volume. So it is important for us to assess the problem because there is, as you stated, there is a cultural bond that exists between Brazil and Africa. But are people, the stakeholder, taking advantage of that? I just mentioned earlier that I came to meet with Embraer. They did a study not long ago of connectivity in Africa from 2014 to 2024, connecting 100 cities per city in Africa. And if you look into the report, you will notice that between African countries, sometimes you have to go to European country to connect two cities in Africa. There is a saying that where people go, good follow. So that's the challenge that we have to solve. We need to make sure that the infrastructure that is built in Africa benefit African. And Brazil can contribute to that. Thank you.
Dr. Carlos Alberto, o senhor falou da importância
Dr. Carlos Alberto, you talked about the ship and the work of the harbor pilots. We know how important shipping is for trade globally. And in Brazil, we hear about how hard it is sometimes to get the goods from the interior of the country to the ports to be shipped and exported. So we heard about the infrastructure in the African continent. What are the main challenges in Brazil for logistics, of the food production, transportation? How could we reduce costs? Well, our exchange with the world, 90% of our exchange is through maritime modes. And so we have 20,000 riverways that we can use, and we are a country with continental dimensions. We are a huge country. So our internal logistics many times are lacking, and they are expensive. So we need to have a much larger railway that would connect the different areas. We would be able to transport many more goods through railways with a lower cost instead of using the roads, and then we have the carbon emissions and accidents. So the transportation of goods between the ports, maritime ports in the same country, needs to be encouraged. So we need to transport things from the north to the south and vice versa using ships through shipping ways. And about exports, Brazil is the largest in the world in soy exports, in sugar, orange juice export. 3 out of every 5 glasses of orange juice come from the port of Santos here in Brazil, where I work. So maritime transportation is very important to us. And for example, the Panamax vessel, that it can carry 80,000 tons of sugar, of corn. And in relation to Africa, how can our work here that we do as harbor pilots here in Brazil, we have an institute here in Brasilia, and we have simulators, a full mission simulator. We can offer training to the other harbor pilots in Africa. Actually, a group of harbor pilots from Africa has already come and taken the course with us. And this is very important because the harbor pilot can they actually, we say they sell two products, security and agility. Since they all work at that same port every day, they have the knowledge. They can move the vessels quicker and with more safety. So if they are able to move a portainer, it's the equipment that takes the containers on and off of the ships, that can take off the grains and other commodities from the vessels. So if there is damage done to this equipment, it's going to hold up that docking bay for weeks or maybe months. So it's a huge damage. So it's very important that these professionals have the highest qualification. So a harbor pilot doesn't only need to learn how to do it, but they need to do it in an excellent way and completely dominate that. It's a mixture of art and science in piloting a ship. In our port of Santos, we have up to 336 meters. So it's 3 soccer fields plus an Olympic-sized pool plus 16 meters. It's and very wide vessels in very restricted waters. So under the water level, there's 14,000 meters there. So this is like a monster with huge inertia that we need to deal with. I sent a photo here. I had just put a very large crude carrier into the port, and it was had 20 meters down. So it was a huge, really a beast to be able to maneuver. So we can train these professionals in simulators and simulate hitting a stone or rocks, but without having any damage. We can also train the operators of the harbor pilot centers. So we are able to offer these services to the African port professionals. This will give them more experience. They will be able to work with more security. They will be able to do more difficult maneuvers. So when one ship comes in, when they come into that dock, and then they are able to back out so the next one can come in. So we don't have that downtime. So even in Santos, just recently, one ship came out. It took 2.5 hours to leave, and then to bring another ship in was another 2.5 hours. Your terminal was stopped for 5 hours. Think of how much money is lost during this downtime. So they are able to gain this experience with training, courses, using simulations, and we are able to offer this training. I think that's a way that we can contribute with the African countries. Our harbor pilots are able to go over the barriers, which is a PIONC it's Permanent International Association for Navigational Complex. So it's a group of experts in port planning and establishing the different dimensions for ports and ships. Now the name of this association has changed, and it's called Port Infrastructure Transportation Association, an international association, and so they are limits that they establish. In the port of Santos, if we followed those standards, only smaller vessels would be able to enter. But now we are because of our experience and our training, we are able to bring in larger vessels. So that's the type of partnership that we would be very happy to offer to our African colleagues, and so that we can contribute to greater safety in transportation, better operations in the African ports, if that is a need in African. I don't have a deep knowledge of African ports and their needs. All right, well, for quite a long time, the productive sector in Brazil complained about excessive laws or not very transparent laws to be able to invest in Brazil or to attract foreign investment here. It seems that we have advanced, but I would like to hear from you how not only Brazil, but the African countries can offer this legal security to attract investments related to sustainable agricultural and food security. Well, it's, a little hard to hear. I've been hearing all these things and my mind is already racing and we get excited about this. So, but I'll try to answer your question. So I'll give you a very recent example of a business that I worked with in Nigeria who produces animal protein. They don't need capital, but they wanted to have a technical partner. And so, what a better technical partner than Brazil for this business in Nigeria? And I talked to many businesses. As I said, they didn't need more capital. They just needed technical partnership. But the insecurity, the legal insecurity, but not only legal, but the government insecurities in Nigeria. And so, led all of the businesses that we talked to here in Brazil to say, oh, I'm sorry, it would be interesting, but I don't think it's worth it. So you're talking about a country with 240 million people with a huge market, but this insecurity in the government and the legal insecurity and the, not legal, but rule of law lead to, many opportunities being lost. So we know that in Africa, there's a lot of potential, but many times, this is the barrier. Many times in Africa, there are some threats and problems. I usually say that the biggest enemies in Africa, the enemies to these opportunities, are the governments and the countries. But having said that, currently, I think in infrastructure that is serving the food development in Africa, things aren't happening not for a lack of capital or financial resources, because the money is there. There is local capital, and there's also international capital. I have one very current example. We are doing quite a sizable financial operation in the Congo, and over almost $700 million in this operation. And this amount is being offered from investors for specific projects, almost all of them for infrastructure projects, and some of them related to sustainable food production. So there is capital, but you need to have that rule of law security and to know exactly what the goals are. Well, we're a little ahead in our time, so I would like you to give your final considerations about our topic or any other topic that you feel is relevant or that can add. So let's start with you, Monica. So tell us a little bit more about this issue that you are so familiar with, the sustainable food production and the relation between Brazil and Africa. Well, I come from the creative industry sector, so I am a viewer of the African continent. I've been there 87 times. I've been to 24 countries. I'm an Africanist. I'm going to spend my end of the year holidays there. I love the African continent with all its diversity, its wonderful people. But I think that we have many, many opportunities there. We know that there are many problems. We have many problems in Brazil. We have insecurities here in Brazil, just as they do there in Brazil. There's violence in Brazil, just like there is in Africa. So we have very similar problems. But let's look at the opportunities that we have that are very similar. I think we have huge opportunities for women and young people, especially. Those are the two groups of people that I work with more. So we have the Women's Business Alliance and the BRICS group also. So we have many opportunities for training. And we also have the business rounds also to try and match similar businesses. So I think we can try to increase our interaction when missions, trade missions come, to have us participate. I'm also on the board of the Brazil Africa Institute, so we can try and, foster these interactions, whether it's in the creative industry, in agriculture, transportation. So we know, I think we can get to know each other better. We are very similar in, our cultures, and we love to be close to each other and interact. But I think there are many opportunities to do business together. Brazil has a lot of needs in the area of logistics, just like Africa does. Especially when it comes to agriculture in Brazil, the roads to transport our agricultural goods are terrible in many places. So we have to do a lot of hard work. That's why young people, leave the countryside and go into the cities. And who stays out in the countryside? The women, because she has to take care of her children. So there's social issues related to that, similar to the ones that happen in Africa. Now, all of these are opportunities to build better roads, to offer better education to the young people so that they are encouraged to stay in the small city, in the rural area, to develop the farms, the agricultural, that will help develop the economy there. Thank you very much, Luis, and all of my colleagues on the panels. Monica, how many times have you been to Africa? Well, like I said, I've been there many times. I've been there 87 times. Well, I've been there around 30 times. I thought I had been there many times, but Monica, you've outdone me. Thank you very much, Monica. It's always a pleasure. I'm going to have to leave now, but it was a huge pleasure being here. Professor João Bosco has my contact. If you want to talk to me, please feel free to contact me.
Mr. Aristide, the floor is yours.
Final thought. I want to jump on one comment with my co-panelists about the great training opportunity that you are offering to African pilot. This is exactly what I meant by we need to be intentional. Brazil is very good in sharing knowledge. Brazil is very good in sharing knowledge with Africa. But we need to go beyond that. Give you one example. You mentioned that you think that you're 3% Senegalese.
Yes.
You do know the port of Dakar is run by?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what I meant. Your level of expertise is needed. How about a joint venture with a port in West Africa that will increase the connectivity between Brazil and Africa? We need to go beyond the knowledge sharing. We need to be intentional. So, to my other colleague about the flow of money, we don't see any money in Africa. Because if you remember the 1980s and 90s, with the IMF and the World Bank, they basically dismantled the infrastructure investment that government needed to do. There is no economy in the world that did not rely on government investment. But somehow, we asked Africans to do the opposite. So we need to make sure that we learn from history. The two things that I want to say in my closing remark. In this country, you do have a great bank, BNDES. So Today, if you look at the other two BRICS countries, they do have similar bank. They call it Exim, I believe, Exim Bank. They invest a lot in Africa. So people talk about politics or rule of law. But in Africa, we hear double standard. That's the reality. Because we know how country in Asia took off. We are a student of history as well. There was no so-called rule of law, but the capital was given to them. Why not Africa? Why not Africa? So that's the reality. And sometimes we do expect other great power to talk to African like that, not Brazil. Not Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Carlos Alberto.
Dr. Carlos, I should take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about pilotage, but I'd like to give a contribution. Since there are logistics issues and losses of food and so forth due to the logistical difficulties in Africa, I'd like to talk about something different that I know because I live, because of my work in the maritime area. The Navy has the Amazon, Blue Amazon. It manages the project of nuclear propulsion for the nuclear submarine that the Navy is producing. And this project of nuclear propulsion has created several subproducts as Brazil started developing enriched uranium. And there are some subproducts from all this project that are applied in medicine and in agriculture as well. With nuclear irradiation in food, making these food to last way longer without getting rotten. So some countries use this technology. There is no harm for your health, and a fruit or grain lasts for 5 months after going through this treatment of nuclear irradiation. And the Brazilian Navy, it's a shame that Minister Mauro Teixeira is no longer here. It's an idea for the government, while Africa does not solve those logistics problems that make some of their perishable material to perish. Invest in this area, an interchange in this area. You know, look for that, Amazon or nuclear irradiation for the preservation of food to increase its durability and use their longevity. And you see that maybe this is a solution while Africa cannot solve their logistic issues, so that both their production to export as well as what they import that has to be distributed throughout the continent can last longer facing those issues, those difficulties. So I think this could be a contribution for this panel. We're talking about food security, we're talking about logistics. So I could make a better marketing about maritime pilotage, but I think this is a good contribution to share. The Navy hasn't asked me to talk about that, but I think this could be an area that we could explore for those willing to invest on that and using this resource, this feature of nuclear power to preserve food. Thank you and congratulations for my colleagues in the panel. So I am available at the Institute of Maritime Pilotage. So I live in Santos, and thank you very much. Dr. Miguel Azevedo, very quickly, to wrap up, in Africa, there is a debate about what I call as micro premium and macro discount. Micro premium or micro award is the quality of business people, companies, people that we meet, we investors. I'm not talking about the money that comes from government or donation. No, I'm talking about money that looks for profitability. In Africa, you have awesome opportunities by awesome people. That's the African award or premium. And then I have the African discount. I will not use the word rule of law, but the discount is the lack of quality of governance in Africa. The quality of governance is weak. The governments, not only in Africa, but we're talking about Africa now. And this creates discounts. It creates demands of profitability rates that are higher. And when I talk to an investor to invest in infrastructure in Africa, they ask me for 25% return. There is no infrastructure on earth that gives you 25% discount. So what happens? There is no infrastructure projects going on. So why do they lose 25%? I I can get 15% from it, and I'm afraid for specific reasons for that. And therefore, what we have is if we can reduce this lack of quality of the governance. So when it comes to governance, I don't mean government. It's a more generic term. I think capital will flow because people are there, money will flow because people are there, communities are there, and the world has a lot of capital to invest. There's much African capital as well, but it's not located in Africa for some reason. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Miguel, and thank you all. Of course, we had so much more to talk about, but we are running out of time. That's why I'd like to thank you for being here, our panelists. If you have any questions or talk to them, please come, look for them, talk to them. But above all, it's important to have this kind of discussion in this meeting between two important areas in the world economy, that is Brazil and Africa. Thank you so much. We'll have more, even more tomorrow.